This video will show how you can configure MSC Sinda 2011 to run in 3 different modes. MSC Sinda 2011 can run either as a full 64-bit Sinda, which takes advantage of the extra memory you have on your computer and gets around the 2 GB limit that 32-bit versions of Sinda had in the past. But you need XP64 or Windows 7 64-bit system in order to run this. If you don't have that, if you have Windows 7 32-bit or XP 32-bit, then you'll have to run the 32-bit version. And when you install, it should install the right version depending on your operating system. But if you have the 64-bit operating system, and for any reason if you wanted to run the 32, you can configure it to run that. Or on any computer, you can configure Sinda to run in what we call the legacy mode, where you can run the older Sinda like 2008 R1 if that's installed on your system. So it will run, you're still running 2011 Sinda, but it will either run the code for 64-bit, which takes advantage of memory. It'll run the 32-bit version of Sinda, or it'll run the old legacy version, 2008 R1 in this case. Now we do have 2 options for the 32-bit and for the legacy mode. There's a double precision and single precision. This just affects the math. Is the math done in 32-bit or 64-bit? And you have that option for the 32-bit and the 64 in the 2008 version. And that's because these older operating systems didn't properly do all the math as 64-bit. It only did floating point and not integers. But the 64-bit operating systems truly take care of that now. And so in this version of Sinda, if you're running this on these platforms and have it configured for 64-bit Sinda, it always runs in double precision. Even if you pick the single precision button to launch Sinda, it always does 64-bit math and takes full advantage of the extra memory. So let me show you first how to configure the system for 64-bit, which again should be pre-configured for you when you install, but if you jump back and forth and need to go back to 64-bit, this is how you do it. We have a tool called the SGRT, stood for Sinda G Registry Tool, and in order to use that you have to open your Intel Fortran development window. And if you've installed, like I have on a Windows 7 64-bit machine, I have 2 different DOS prompts, a 64-bit one and a 32-bit one. So I'm going to open the 64-bit one, and even though I have admin privileges, if I really want to set this for the whole machine for any other login, anyone who's going to log in, not just my user account, I need to right-click and say run this as admin. And when I do that, this window here now is logged in as administrator, and when I type SGRT/ADV for advanced mode, this is where we can set the version of Sinda or flavor of Sinda we want it to run. And I'm going to pick 64-bit, and I'm going to not have legacy. That means run the older Sinda. And then I have to say what directory my binaries are in that it's going to run, and this is in the 2011.1 folder. And then, because I ran as administrator, I can set it for the local user, or I can set it for every user who logs in on the system. If you don't have any admin privileges, you're still able to set it for your current login. So I'm going to hit apply. And now, let's just run Sinda from Thermal Studio here. When we run Sinda from Thermal Studio, and I right-click on this, you can see it says it's running the 64-bit. There's always a little sentence there, whether you run it in the no Fortran mode or the Fortran mode. And even if you pick single precision, remember the 64-bit version of Sinda always runs 64-bit math plus takes advantage of the extra memory. So these really mean nothing anymore to 64-bit Sinda. It's running 64-bit, and if you look at the output of any files that are created, like your SOT file, your output file, you'll see it's 64-bit Sinda, and it says here it's run in double precision instead of SP. It always will run in there, even if you pick single precision. So now, if for some reason you wanted to run 32-bit Sinda and you try to configure that in a 64-bit window, the registry tool will complain because all of these path variables are set to run a 64-bit version of Sinda. So if I try to say, let's set my computer to run 32-bit Sinda, it's going to tell you you're trying to run 32-bit Sinda with a 64-bit Intel compiler. You have to make sure you pick the right Fortran window to configure Sinda in, either 32 or 64. So I'm going to drop out of this, close this, and I'll open my 32-bit Fortran build window. And this time I'm not going to right click and run administrator, I'm just going to run for local machine. So an SGRT/ADV for advanced, and you'll notice this window is grayed out now. I can't set it for other users, I can only set it for myself. Whether I have admin privileges or not, that's all I can do if I don't launch the window as an administrator. So now let's pick 32-bit, which I actually chose before, and let's apply that. And now when I run Sinda in Thermal Studio, instead of it running in 64-bit, which you remember the last time we ran, it ran in 64-bit. Now, because I've configured it for 32-bit, when I run, it says running Win32 Sinda, and the output files will show that it ran, it doesn't say 64-bit. And in here it will say single precision, or it will say double precision, because the 32-bit Sinda can run the math in either 32 or 64-bit math. But the 64-bit Sinda, if it says 64-bit on this line, then it's always going to run in double precision. Now, maybe there's a case where you want to run the older Sinda 2008. You have a model that you want to compare it to the new Sinda, speed or accuracy or something, and so you want to do that. Well, you can do that in a 32-bit window too, because that was a 32-bit code. So let's run SGRT, and we say 32-bit, we say legacy mode, but there's one other thing we have to change. We have to change where the Sinda 32-bit legacy version was installed. And normally under MSC software, we have our Sinda folder, and we will have either a 2008 or a 2011. Now, this 2011 has both the 32 and the 64-bit version. If we want to run the old Sinda, which is really launched out of our new 2011 Sinda, we need to say where those binaries are. And so we just change this path to point to the 2008 version. So we pick the path to the old installation, we pick 32-bit, we put legacy mode, and we make sure we're doing this all has been launched from a 32-bit Intel Fortran window. And now I'm going to set it for the current user and exit. And now when I look at my Thermal Studio here and I run, you're going to see Sinda's running in the legacy mode. And if you look at your output files, you'll see it's 2008 R1, either single or double precision, whatever you run. So you can see it's very easy to jump back and forth, and I'll finally end by going back to my 64-bit because that's where I really want to be running on this machine. And I'm going to run that as administrator. I'm going to run SGRT ADV. I'm going to say 64-bit and get rid of that legacy. If I don't, it will warn me saying the Sinda legacy version can't be run with 64-bit because that's the old Sinda. So 64-bit, I'm in a 64-bit window. That means it's got all the path, lib, and include variables pointing to the 64-bit, and I apply. Now this registry tool is good for a few other things. If you want to put Sinda in a batch mode where there's no pause at the end that you have to hit a keystroke, where maybe you want to stack up in a batch file 20 or 30 Sinda jobs or even 2 or 3. You can stack them up in there, and there won't be a pause at the end that takes a user intervention to make it go to the next one, but it will just run through them all. You can turn off the graphics, there's some other things, or you can even link into your own files, so whenever Sinda runs, it will always drop your libraries in, whether they're source code, object files, or library files. But in this case, I'm not doing any of that, and so now, if I run Thermal Studio, or the dashboard, or the DOS prompt, anywhere I run Sinda, Patran or anywhere, it's going to now run, whether I pick single or double precision, it's running the 64-bit mode because let's try this one. You can see it a little slower. The other went too fast. Looks like there's an error here. I may have done something wrong. Let's go back and SGRT/ADV. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I was pointing to my old directory where my old Sinda was. I need to change this to 11.1. There's no point in there, it's just 111. And now let's apply it here. Because now I'm in the 64-bit and I want to use the binaries that are in that folder. So go back to our dashboard, load a model, run it, and you see it's running in the 64-bit mode. It's compiling and linking okay because it found the right binaries, or I can run it in a no Fortran mode. And whether, again, I run in single or double precision, if I'm running 64-bit mode, it's always running in double precision math. There's no penalty at all for doing the extra precision in the math like there is on old 32-bit computers. This concludes the demonstration on how to configure Sinda to run in different modes.